The plea in the darkness. The night was heavy with silence. Strange lights from alien ships burned in the sky, covering the town with shadows. People stood in the streets afraid to move, afraid to speak. They had seen this before, the soldiers, coming to take someone away. But this time it was different. This time it was only a child. 2 alien soldiers marched through the crowd. Their armor shone like cold steel, and their eyes were filled with cruelty. Between them, they dragged a small girl. She was tiny, no more than 3 years old. Her hair was tangled, her face covered with dirt, and her eyes were wide with terror. The crowd watched, but no one dared to step forward. Everyone knew what happened to those who resisted. Families had disappeared. Neighbors had been taken in the night. The soldiers were merciless. The girl cried out, her voice sharp and desperate. "Don't take her, she's just 3. Her small hands reached out toward the crowd, begging for help. Her words cut through the silence like a blade. She was not crying for herself. She was pleading for another, her little sister, even younger, hiding behind the soldier's grip. But no one moved. No one spoke. Fear chained their hearts. The soldiers laughed, mocking her. 3 years old, 5 years old, it makes no difference. Orders are orders. Children or not, they belong to us now. The girl struggled harder, her voice breaking with tears. "Please, she's only a baby. Don't hurt her. Don't take her away." Her screams echoed across the empty streets, bouncing off stone walls. The crowd lowered their eyes, pretending not to hear, pretending not to see. It was easier to stay silent. It was safer. The soldiers pulled harder, dragging the little child forward. She stumbled, fell, and scraped her knees on the rough ground. But still, she tried to shield her sister with her small body. She would not let them take her without a fight. One soldier lifted his weapon, annoyed by her resistance. "Silence, or you will be silenced forever," he growled. The older girl froze, trembling, but her lips still moved in a whisper. "Please. Someone help us." The whisper carried, soft but sharp, reaching the ears of everyone in the crowd. Hearts tightened, but fear still chained them. Nobody wanted to be the one to stand against the soldiers. The soldiers began to drag the children again. The younger one, barely able to walk, cried helplessly. The older sister screamed louder, her voice filled with raw fear. "Don't take her, she's just 3. The cry was so full of pain, so desperate, that for a moment the crowd felt ashamed. Mothers held their own children tighter. Fathers clenched their fists, but stayed silent. Still, nobody moved. And then, something changed. From the shadows at the edge of the street, a figure stepped forward. Slow, steady footsteps echoed on the stone. The sound broke the silence, and every eye turned toward it. A man walked out from the darkness. His face was hidden beneath a hood, but his posture was strong, unshaken. He did not look like the others in the crowd. He did not look afraid. The soldiers paused, surprised. Few dared to interrupt their work. The crowd gasped, whispering to each other. "Who is he? Why would anyone step forward? He will be killed." The man stopped in front of the soldiers. He raised his head, revealing a scarred face and tired eyes, but his gaze burned with something fierce, anger, courage, or perhaps both. The older girl stared at him, her tears shining in the dim light. For the first time that night, hope flickered in her eyes. The soldiers sneered. "Step aside, human. This is not your concern." But the man did not move. He did not speak. He simply stood between the soldiers and the children. The crowd held its breath. Every second felt like an eternity. Was this man insane? Did he not understand the danger? One soldier laughed, his voice cruel. "You want to die for them? For worthless alien children?" Still, the man stayed silent, his fists tightening at his sides. The soldiers raised their weapons. The tension was sharp, like a blade ready to cut. The crowd could not look away. The children's cries mixed with the sound of metal shifting. The girl whispered again, her voice trembling but filled with hope. "Please, save her." The man's eyes softened for a moment as he looked down at the children. Then slowly he lifted his head back toward the soldiers. His jaw tightened. The crowd shivered. Something in his stance told them this man was not going to step aside. The silence of the night broke once more, but this time not with cries, not with laughter. It broke with the sound of defiance. The man took a single step forward, and in that moment, everyone knew. The darkness was about to change. The man who dared. The man stood like a wall before the soldiers. His shadow stretched long across the dirt road, covering the trembling children behind him. He said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than any shout. The alien soldiers shifted uneasily. They were used to fear. They were used to obedience. But this human did not look afraid. His body was scarred, his eyes heavy with old battles, yet his stance was strong, steady. The crowd whispered among themselves. Who is he? Is he mad? He will die for nothing. But deep in their voices was a spark, something close to wonder, because no one had dared to stand up before. The lead soldier snarled, "Move aside, human. These children belong to the Empire now." His voice was sharp, his weapon raised. The man did not move. He lowered his hood slowly, revealing his face to the night. His jaw was set like stone, his eyes cold as steel. The older girl, still clutching her younger sister, looked up at him. Her small voice broke the silence. "Please, don't let them take her." The man glanced back at her only for a heartbeat. His expression softened just enough for her to see. It was not a promise spoken in words. It was a promise written in his eyes. "I will not let them have her." The soldier stepped closer, his boots slamming against the ground. "This is your last warning. Move, or be crushed." The man finally spoke, his voice deep and calm. "She is only a child. Let her go." The crowd gasped. No one had ever spoken to the soldiers like that, not here, not in years. The soldier's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "A child? The Empire has no use for excuses. Orders are orders." He lifted his weapon higher. "Step aside or bleed." But the man stepped forward instead. Just one step. Enough to make the soldiers tense. Enough to make the crowd hold its breath. The younger child whimpered, hiding her face in her sister's arms. The older one clung tighter, staring at the man with wide, hopeful eyes. The lead soldier growled, "So be it." With a flash, the soldier swung his weapon down. The strike was meant to be final, quick, merciless. But the man moved like a storm. His hand shot up, catching the weapon mid-swing. Metal screeched as his grip locked around it. The soldier's eyes widened in shock. No one was supposed to be that fast. In one motion, the man twisted the weapon, pulling it free. He struck with his other hand, hard, precise. The soldier crashed to the ground, armor dented, gasping for breath. The crowd gasped louder than before. For the first time in years, a soldier had fallen. The second soldier roared in fury, charging at the man with his blade raised. Sparks flew as metal clashed against the stolen weapon. The man fought without hesitation, his movements sharp, controlled. The children screamed, the crowd scattered, but some could not look away. They had never seen a human fight an alien soldier and win. The soldier swung again, but the man ducked low, driving his shoulder into the soldier's chest. With brutal force, he shoved him backward, sending him crashing against the wall. The blade clattered to the ground. The man stood tall, holding the stolen weapon like it was an extension of his body. His breathing was steady, his eyes locked on the soldiers. One soldier lay groaning on the ground. The other staggered to his feet, rage burning in his eyes. "You will die for this," he spat. "You and every fool who thinks they can resist." The man didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was his defiance. Behind him, the older girl whispered again, her voice filled with awe. He saved us." The crowd stirred uneasily. Fear still gripped them, but something else was rising, a dangerous feeling, one they had forgotten. Hope. The second soldier steadied himself, raising his blade again. He shouted for reinforcements, his voice echoing through the night. The sound carried far, too far. From the distance, the heavy thrum of engines began to shake the air. More soldiers were coming, more weapons. The Empire would not allow one man to shame them. The man glanced back at the children. "Stay behind me," he said softly. The older girl nodded, tears still streaking her face. She pulled her sister closer, hiding her small body behind the man's legs. The ground trembled as shadows appeared at the edge of the street. More armored figures, weapons ready, marching in formation. Their numbers grew with every second. The crowd panicked, pushing back into alleys and doorways. Whispers filled the air. "He can't fight them all. He will be killed. We must leave." But no one left. Not yet. They couldn't tear their eyes away. The soldiers surrounded the man, their armor gleaming under the harsh lights. The leader barked an order. "Seize him, kill the children." The man's grip tightened on the weapon in his hand. His stance lowered, ready, like a wolf facing a pack of predators. He knew the odds. He knew death might be only moments away, but he did not step back. The older girl's voice trembled, but her words carried into the night. "Please, don't leave us." The man's eyes flickered with something fierce. Not fear, not despair, but determination. He turned back to face the soldiers, his voice steady. "If you want them, you will have to go through me." The night froze. The soldiers raised their weapons. The crowd held its breath. And the battle was about to begin. The children's plea. The sun rose higher as the small group walked away from the broken ruins. The widow carried her daughter in her arms while her son held tightly to her hand. Behind them, the city of ashes grew smaller and smaller. Ahead lay the hills, rough and empty, but safer than the ruins filled with raiders. The human walked a short distance ahead. His steps were heavy, steady. He did not speak much, but every so often he glanced back to make sure they followed. His eyes scanned the horizon again and again, always watching, always guarding. The widow studied him as they walked. His armor was battered, scratched from many battles. His pack was heavy, but he carried it without complaint. He looked like a warrior, yet he had shown them only kindness. She wondered what kind of man he was. What had brought him to this world? Why had he not abandoned them like everyone else? Her son tugged at her sleeve. "Mama," he whispered, "is he going to stay with us?" She froze at the question, her lips parted, but no words came. She did not know the answer. How could she? This human had given them food, warmth, and safety, but he was still a stranger. The boy lowered his voice, his eyes shining with hope. "I want him to stay. He looks strong. He could protect us. Maybe he could be like father." His voice cracked on the last word. The widow's heart broke. Her daughter, too young to hide her feelings, reached her small arms toward the human. She whispered in a tiny voice, "Papa." The widow gasped. Her chest tightened. Tears stung her eyes. She shook her head quickly, pulling her daughter close. "No, child, he is not." But her voice failed. The little girl did not understand. She only smiled, her eyes fixed on the human with innocent trust. The human heard the word. He paused in his steps. For a moment he stood still, his back straight. His shoulders seemed to grow heavier. Slowly he turned his head. His eyes met the widow's. She looked away quickly, ashamed. The widow wanted to scold her children, to silence their pleas, but she could not. Their voices were born of need, of hunger not only for food but for safety, for love, for a father. They longed for someone strong to shield them, someone they could trust. As they stopped to rest by a shallow stream, the boy finally spoke directly to the human. His words were broken, but his meaning was clear. He touched his chest, then pointed at the human. "Father?" he asked softly. The widow's eyes widened. She felt the heat rise in her face. "No," she whispered sharply. But her son did not stop. His small hand reached toward the human again. His eyes begged for an answer. The human looked at the boy, then at the widow. His face was calm but unreadable. He did not laugh, he did not scold. Instead, he knelt down, meeting the boy's gaze. He placed his hand gently on the child's shoulder. His lips moved. He spoke in his strange human tongue. The boy did not understand the words, but he understood the warmth in the man's touch. The widow turned her face away, her heart a storm. She wanted to scream that this was wrong, that her children could not place such hopes on a stranger. But deep inside, another voice whispered, perhaps this was not wrong at all. Perhaps this was the only chance left. That night, they camped beneath the stars. The human built a small fire with careful hands. Its light glowed on his face, making his features softer, less foreign. The children huddled near him, their fear fading in the warmth of his presence. The widow sat apart, watching, her mind a battlefield. She remembered her husband's face, his laugh, his promises. But those promises had turned to ash with his body on the battlefield. Now her children whispered to a man not of their blood. Calling him Papa, she wanted to pull them away, but she could not. Their smiles were too rare, their laughter too precious. Could she take it from them? The boy looked at the human again, his voice quiet but firm. Please stay, please protect us. The little girl echoed him, her small hands clutching the man's arm. Papa, don't leave. The human froze. His hand tightened on the hilt of his weapon, as if remembering old battles. His eyes closed for a moment. When he opened them, there was something new inside them. Not just duty, but conflict. He had not come here to be a father. He had not planned to save a widow and her children. Yet their voices pierced through the walls he had built around his heart. The widow's breath caught as she saw his face. For the first time he looked unsure, torn between walking away and staying. The fire crackled, the stars shone, and in that quiet moment, the fate of their small family trembled on the edge of choice. The children pressed closer to him, their small voices whispered again, Please, don't go. And though the human gave no answer in words, his silence carried weight. He did not move away. He stayed by the fire, watching over them until morning. The widow closed her eyes, her heart beating fast. She knew now that her children had planted a seed. They had asked for the impossible, a father from another world, a protector from another race. But sometimes, in the vast cold of the galaxy, the impossible was the only hope left. The widow's decision. The night after the children's plea lingered like a heavy shadow over the widow's heart. She had tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she heard their voices again. Papa, don't leave. Please protect us. The fire had died down to glowing embers, the human still awake, his figure dark against the stars. His weapon rested on his knees, his eyes scanning the horizon, always alert, always ready. The widow clutched her children close. Her daughter slept peacefully for the first time in many nights. Her tiny hands curled against her mother's chest. Her son slept too, his head resting on the borrowed cloth the human had given. Their breathing was steady, calm. For them, the human's presence was already an answer. He had become the wall between them and the darkness. But for the widow, her heart was in chaos, her pride, her fear, her memories of her lost husband. All of them screamed against what her children asked. Yet the truth could not be silenced. She could not protect them alone. She was weak, her strength fading. If not for the human's food, the human's fire, they would already be gone. By dawn, her decision was growing like a blade inside her chest. She had fought against it for days, but now she could not. Her children needed more than scraps of hope. They needed safety. They needed someone stronger than her. The morning was quiet. Birds circled above the ruins, their cries sharp in the thin air. The human packed his belongings carefully, preparing to move on. He glanced at the widow, then at the children, his expression unreadable. Perhaps he was already planning to leave, to continue his journey alone. The thought struck her like a knife. If he left, she and her children would be nothing but ghosts within days. She could not let him go. She could not lose the only chance they had left. Her hands trembled as she rose to her feet. She placed her daughter gently on the ground beside her son. Then she stepped forward. Her breath came fast, her knees weakened, but she forced herself on. The human noticed her movement. He paused, his eyes sharp, watching her approach. Then, before he could react, she did something no widow of her people would ever do. She fell to her knees in the dirt before him, her head lowered, her hands trembling. Her voice broke as she whispered words she never thought she would speak. "Please, take me as your wife." The air froze, even the wind seemed to stop. Her children stirred, their sleepy eyes opening. Her son sat up quickly, his mouth falling open in shock. Her daughter blinked, confused. The widow's face burned with shame, but she kept her forehead pressed to the earth. Her people would spit on her for this. They would call her cursed, weak, desperate. But she no longer cared. She would kneel 1,000 times if it meant her children could live. The human did not move. His shadow loomed over her, heavy and silent. She could feel his eyes on her. Her heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the world. At last she lifted her head slightly, her eyes wet with tears. Her voice broke again, louder this time. "Please, I beg you, be my husband. Be their father, protect us. I have nothing left to offer, no dowry, no wealth, only my loyalty, my service, and my children's love." The human's eyes narrowed. His face was unreadable. Perhaps he was angry, perhaps shocked, but he did not step away. He did not turn his back. The widow's son suddenly crawled to her side, his small hand gripping her arm, his voice desperate. "Mama, don't beg," he cried. His eyes flashed toward the human. "He already cares. For us, he will stay, won't he?" The boy's voice cracked, hope and fear battling inside him. Her daughter toddled forward and wrapped her tiny arms around the human's leg. Her soft voice spoke the word again, the word that carried both hope and pain. "Papa." The widow's tears fell freely now. Her pride shattered, her soul laid bare. "If you leave us," she whispered, her voice trembling, "we will not survive. I cannot watch my children die. If marriage is what it takes, then take me. I will belong to you." The human's jaw tightened. His hand gripped his weapon as though the weight of her words was heavier than any battle he had fought. His eyes burned with conflict. He looked at the children clinging to him, at the woman kneeling in the dirt. Her face was pale, her body shaking, but her words were filled with truth. Minutes passed in silence. Minutes that felt like hours. The widow dared not move. Her children clung to him, waiting. Finally, the human knelt down, his movement slow, controlled. He reached out a hand and lifted her chin. His touch was firm, but not cruel. Their eyes met, hers filled with tears. His filled with storm. He did not speak words she could understand, but his gaze told her everything. He was torn, caught between his own path and the lives now pressed into his hands. The widow's heart stopped as he finally breathed out. A single word fell from his lips, deep and steady. Yes. The world seemed to shift. Her breath broke into a sob. Her children cried out in joy, throwing themselves into his arms. The widow bowed her head again, relief flooding her body, but deep in her chest, fear still stirred. For though the human had agreed, she knew the galaxy was cruel. The enemies of her people would not forgive. This union, danger would follow them like a shadow. And yet, for the first time since the war began, she felt something stronger than fear, hope. The human's vow. The night after the battle was long and restless. The air still smelled of blood and smoke. The ground was littered with the marks of struggle, and the silence that followed was heavy, almost too heavy. The widow sat close to her children, their small bodies curled against her. They had fallen asleep at last, their exhaustion deeper than fear, but she herself could not rest. Her eyes stayed fixed on the man who stood just beyond the firelight. The human did not sit. He stood tall, his weapon in hand, his face hard in the glow of the embers. His armor was torn, streaks of blood covered his arms, yet his eyes remained sharp. He looked like a wall of stone, unshakable, unbreakable. The widow's heart trembled. She had begged him to be her husband. She had given her pride away. But tonight, as she watched him fight, she realized something more. He had not just accepted her plea, he had already chosen. He had already acted as a father, as a protector. When dawn came, the hills glowed faintly with light. The human turned his gaze to the horizon. He seemed to be waiting, listening. His silence was heavy, as though he carried a burden too great to speak aloud. Finally he approached, his boots crunched over the stones. The widow lifted her head, fear and hope tangled in her chest. Her children stirred, waking slowly, their tired eyes brightening when they saw him. He stood before them, silent for a long moment. Then, without warning, he knelt, his heavy frame lowering until he was eye to eye with the children. His scarred hands rested on the earth, steady and strong. The boy looked at him with wide eyes. The little girl whispered again that single word, "Papa." The human's eyes softened. For the first time since they met, he let his guard down. His hand rose, resting gently on the boy's head, then on the girl's. His lips parted and he spoke in his own tongue, his voice deep, carrying weight like thunder. Though they could not understand every word, the tone was clear. He was making a promise. The widow's breath caught. Her heart raced. She listened to his vow, his words strange yet powerful, and she understood not by language but by spirit. He would not leave them. He would fight for them. He would be their father, their protector, their family. The widow's eyes blurred with tears. Her body shook. For so long she had felt abandoned by her people, cursed by fate. But here, kneeling before her children, was a human who carried no blood tie to them, no duty by law, and yet he chose them. He chose her. The human's voice grew louder, fiercer. His hand gripped his weapon and raised it high. The sun caught the steel, sending sparks of light across. The hills, his vow was not only for them, it was for the galaxy itself, a roar into the heavens. Any who came to harm them would face him first. The widow felt her knees weaken. She dropped to the ground, covering her mouth as sobs broke from her chest. This man, this human, had given her what no one else had. Not pity, not charity, but a vow stronger than stone. Her children cried out with joy, clinging to him. Their small voices echoed through the morning air. "Papa, Papa." The human did not flinch. He held them close, his broad arms wrapping around their small bodies, his face bent low, pressing against their hair. His silence was no longer distance. It was strength, a shield. The widow crawled forward, her tears falling freely. She bowed her head until it touched the ground at his feet. Her voice cracked. "I will serve you all my days. I will stand by you. I will be your wife." The human reached down. His hand lifted her chin. His eyes met hers. For a long moment, no words passed between them, only truth. Then he spoke, slow and steady, his accent rough, but the meaning clear. "You are mine, and I am yours." The widow's heart shattered, not in sorrow, but in relief. Her hands clutched his. She could barely breathe, but even as joy filled their small camp, danger still whispered in the wind. The raiders had fled. Yes, but not in defeat. They had seen the human's power. They had felt his fury. They would not forget. They would return with more, with greater numbers, with vengeance. The human knew this. His eyes hardened as he looked once more toward the horizon. His vow had been made, and it bound him now to war. But for the widow, for the children, it was enough. For the first time since her world burned, she felt safe, truly safe. She leaned into him, her children in his arms, and whispered the words she had buried deep in her heart. "Thank you, husband." The human closed his eyes. His jaw tightened. His grip around them grew stronger. He had taken a vow, and nothing in the galaxy would break it. Enemies in the shadows. The days that followed were quiet on the surface, yet beneath the silence, danger brewed. The widow walked beside the human now, no longer just a stranger but the man who had accepted her desperate plea. Her children followed, close, clinging to the human's presence as if he were a shield against the cold universe. The human was no ordinary traveler. His movements revealed discipline. His eyes scanned every horizon, every broken path. He rose before dawn, built fires with practiced skill, and carried his weapon with a soldier's hand. To the widow, it became clear. This was a man who had survived countless battles. For a short time, it felt as though fate had turned merciful. The children laughed more, their small bellies no longer empty, their eyes no longer hollow. They sat close to the human at night, listening to the strange sound of his voice as he spoke in his own tongue. They did not understand the words, but his tone carried comfort. But peace is fragile, especially in a broken galaxy. The widow first noticed it in whispers among the ruins they passed, shadows that moved too quickly, eyes watching from the dark. She tried to dismiss them, but her instincts screamed danger. Then one night, as they camped near the jagged cliffs, the human stiffened. His hand went to his weapon, his eyes sharpened. The widow froze, clutching her daughter. "What is it?" she whispered. The human held up his hand, signaling silence. He listened, his body tense. Then she heard it too. The faint crunch of boots on stone, the rustle of figures moving through the dark, raiders. Her blood turned to ice. Raiders had no mercy. They stole food, burned homes, and took the weak as slaves. They had already destroyed her world once, now they hunted again. The human rose, his movements silent but sure. He gestured to the widow, pointing toward a narrow crack in the cliffs. His meaning was clear. Hide. The widow gathered her children, her heart hammering. She pushed them into the crevice, shielding their small bodies with her own. But her eyes remained fixed on the human. Fear battled with trust. Would he abandon them now to save himself? Or would he truly fight for them? The raiders came, their voices harsh, their laughter cruel. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, weapons gleaming. They had seen the fire, they had smelled the food. One called out in a guttural voice, mocking, "We smell prey, a widow and her brats maybe? Bring them out." The widow's body shook. Her daughter whimpered. The boy pressed his hand over her mouth, whispering for silence. The human stepped forward, his shadow tall in the firelight. He did not hide. He did not run. Instead, he faced them head on. His weapon gleamed in his hand. His voice rang out, harsh, strong, a warning. Though the raiders could not understand his human tongue, his tone carried no doubt. "Come closer and die." The raiders laughed. One man, one sneered. One against many? They rushed forward. The widow clutched her children tighter, her eyes wide. She wanted to close them, to block out the horror, but she could not. She watched as the human moved. He fought like a storm. His weapon cracked through the night, his strikes fast and brutal. He dodged their blades with trained precision. Every movement was controlled, deadly. He was outnumbered, yet the raiders began to fall one by one. The widow's son gasped in awe, whispering, "He fights for us." But even storms can be overwhelmed. More raiders poured from the shadows. Their numbers doubled, then tripled. The human gritted his teeth. His strength did not falter, but he could not fight forever. One raider slipped past him, heading for the crevice where the widow and children hid. The widow's blood froze. She shielded her little ones with her body, closing her eyes, but before the raider could strike, the human was there. His blade cut through the darkness. The attacker fell. The widow's breath caught. Tears blurred her vision. This man, this human, was not fighting for himself alone. He was fighting for them. The battle raged until the raiders, realizing their losses, retreated into the night, their curses echoing against the cliffs. The ground was littered with their dead, the fire smothered in the chaos. Silence returned, broken only by the widow's sobs and the heavy breathing of the human. He stood in the blood-soaked dirt, his armor torn, his face streaked with sweat and ash. His eyes burned with fury. But when they met hers, the fire softened. He had chosen again and again to fight for her and her children. The widow stumbled from the crevice, her knees weak. She fell before him, clutching his hand. Her tears fell onto his skin. You did not leave us," she whispered. Her voice broke with both relief and disbelief. The human said nothing. His breath was heavy, His hand tightened around hers just once, firm, steady. The children ran to him, clinging to his legs. Their small voices cried out, "Papa, Papa." And for the first time the human did not flinch. He did not step back. His hand rested gently on their heads, but far in the distance the sound of horns echoed through the night. The widow's heart dropped. This was only the beginning. The raiders would return, and not just with a few. They would come with an army. The shadows of the galaxy had noticed them, and now they would not stop. The widow's decision had bound them together. The human's vow had drawn blood, and now enemies hunted them all. Love beyond the stars. The days that followed were unlike any the widow had ever known. For the first time since her husband's death, she no longer walked with fear in her chest. For the first time, her children laughed freely. Their faces, once pale and empty, now glowed with light. They clung to the human not out of desperation, but out of love. Every morning he trained. His body moved with the rhythm of a warrior. His weapon flashing in the air. His scars told of battles survived, his eyes told of burdens carried. But now, he no longer trained for himself alone. Every strike, every swing, was a promise, a shield for the family that now belonged to him, mate. Widow watched him in silence, her heart both heavy and full. He was not of her people, not of her world, yet he had given her more than they ever had. When she bowed before her own kind, they turned away. When she begged them for food, they mocked her. But this human, this stranger from the stars, had chosen her children. In the evenings, they sat around the fire. The children curled against him. Their small voices asked him questions he could not understand, but he answered anyway. His voice deep and warm, his laughter rare but real. The widow listened, her chest tightening every time the children called him Papa, and he no longer denied it, he no longer turned away. The galaxy, however, was not blind. The raiders who had fled spread stories, tales of a human warrior who had taken an alien, widow and her children. Some mocked the story, calling it weakness. Others feared it, whispering that a human who fought for love could not be broken. Soon others came, not raiders, but travelers, merchants, and refugees. They passed through the same valleys and ruins. They saw the family together, saw the human standing guard, saw the widow walking proudly at his side, and the whispers grew. They are not just survivors. Some said, they are proof that even across species, love can bloom. The widow felt it too, the weight of eyes upon them. But instead of shame, she felt pride. She no longer bowed her head, she walked taller. She was no longer just a poor widow. She was the wife of a human, the mother of children, who now had a father stronger than steel. One night, as the stars stretched wide across the sky, the widow asked the question that had lived in her heart. Why? Her voice trembled as she spoke. Her eyes shone with firelight. Why did you not leave us? You had no reason, no bond, no duty. Why us? The human looked at her for a long time, his silence heavy. Then he reached for her hand. His touch was rough but steady. He spoke slowly, carefully, choosing words she could understand. Because you are mine, because they are mine, and I will never leave what is mine. Her heart broke and healed in the same breath. Tears slid down her face as she pressed her forehead to his chest. Her children smiled in their sleep, their dreams safe under his watch. The vow he had spoken was no longer just words. It had become truth, but the galaxy was cruel. The raiders did return, this time in greater numbers. Their ships darkened the sky. Their war cries filled the air. The widow trembled, holding her children close. But the human did not falter. He stood tall, his weapon ready. His eyes burned with fire. The battle that followed was fierce. Blood and fire rained upon the land. Yet the human fought like a storm made flesh. Every strike of his blade, every shot of his weapon, was a roar. Of defiance the raiders fell one after another, broken by his fury. When it was done, when silence returned at last, the raiders lay scattered in defeat. The human stood over them, bloodied but unbroken. And in that moment a legend was born, whispers carried across the stars. Stories of the human who fought not for riches, not for power, but for love. For a widow and her children, some called him mad, others called him noble. But all agreed on one thing: humanity was not to be underestimated. The widow held her children close as she walked to his side, her voice soft but steady. "You are more than my husband. You are our shield, our hope, our home." He looked at her, his face weary, his body scarred, but in his eyes burned a light stronger than war. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her and the children, and for the first time he spoke, in words she fully understood. Family. The stars above seemed brighter, the night no longer cold. For in the vast emptiness of the galaxy, a bond had been forged that no blade could sever. The alien widow was no longer alone, her children no longer fatherless. They had found safety, they had found love, they had found humanity, and across the stars their story spread. A tale of sorrow turned to strength, of despair turned to hope, a tale that proved once more why humanity was feared, why humanity was admired, why humanity was celebrated. Because when humans love, they love with fire. When they protect with fury. And when they vow, their vow shakes the very galaxy.